Have you ever thought of Buddha as a Hindu god? I've always been fascinated by the intersections between different belief systems, especially when it comes to the rich spiritual traditions of the East. I think back to when I first started studying Buddhism and Hinduism, two paths that, on the surface, seemed so distinct, but with roots intertwined in ways I hadn't expected. One day, during a deep dive into some ancient texts, I stumbled upon something that really caught me off guard. The claim that Buddha, the Enlightened One, might actually be an avatar of Vishnu, a central figure in Hinduism. It was like a plot twist that reshaped how I viewed the whole story of these two spiritual giants. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Some Hindus say Buddha wasn't just any spiritual leader. They believe he was sent by Vishnu as part of a divine mission. On the other hand, many Buddhists argue this idea isn't based on ancient reverence, but instead, it's a case of one tradition trying to impose its narrative onto another. I can see why this argument stirs emotions on both sides. After all, when you grow up with certain beliefs, hearing someone say that your spiritual leader might be rebranded under another religion's pantheon can feel like a personal affront. In the next few minutes, I want to walk you through the key points of this debate. You'll hear perspectives that range from scholars of ancient texts to modern believers who are deeply invested in this controversy. I'm going to dive into both the Hindu and Buddhist sides, as well as touch on some fascinating theories that could turn the conversation on its head. And trust me, once we dig into the hidden truths and nuances, you might find yourself rethinking what you thought you knew about either tradition. I don't claim to have all the answers, but what I can promise is an honest, thoughtful exploration of this topic. My goal here isn't to stir up division, but to shed light on a conversation that's been simmering for centuries, often quietly, but sometimes explosively. And who knows, maybe by the end of this, you'll come away with a deeper appreciation for the complexity and beauty of both Buddhism and Hinduism, regardless of where you stand on the debate. So let's begin and take a closer look at how history, culture, and belief all come together in this intriguing spiritual crossroads. On the other side of this debate, we have Buddhism, which, in many ways, emerged as a departure from Hinduism's rituals and hierarchy. When Siddhartha Gautama became the Buddha, he wasn't trying to add another god to the mix. He was seeking enlightenment, a personal transformation, and then teaching others how to follow the same path through wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline. Buddha's enlightenment didn't rely on a divine figure coming down to save humanity, but rather on each individual's capacity to overcome suffering. Now, let's bring this back to the present. Imagine walking through Varanasi, one of India's oldest and holiest cities. You've got the Kashi Vishwanath temple on one side, a site dedicated to Shiva and pulsating with Hindu devotion. And just a short distance away is Sarnath, where the Buddha first shared his teachings. I remember the first time I encountered the notion that Buddha could be an avatar of Vishnu. It felt almost surreal, like mixing two stories I'd always kept separate in my mind. I thought about what that would mean for the identity of each tradition, because let's be honest, it's more than just a historical footnote. For Buddhists, the Buddha is not only their spiritual guide, but a figure who represents the rejection of certain Hindu concepts, particularly the role of deities. For Hindus, though, this claim feels more like an honoring, an acknowledgement of Buddha's greatness by folding him into their vast cosmic narrative. But let's take a step back and look at the landscape here. Hinduism is an ancient, incredibly complex system of beliefs, with gods and goddesses who play distinct roles in maintaining balance in the universe. Vishnu, often called the Preserver, is one of the most revered deities, known for taking on various forms or avatars whenever the world is in chaos. Think of his avatars as different characters in a continuing saga, each one arriving with a purpose. So, when some Hindus say Buddha is one of these avatars, they're essentially saying he was part of a divine mission to keep the world on track. This proximity is more than just geographical. It's a reflection of how these two traditions have lived side by side for centuries, sometimes influencing each other, sometimes in conflict. It's a relationship that's both close and complicated. So, when a Hindu text casually refers to Buddha as one of Vishnu's avatars, it might seem innocent at first. But to Buddhists, this isn't just a harmless note in a holy book. It feels like a rewriting of their own story, one that fundamentally shifts who the Buddha was and what he taught. It's like if someone suddenly said that all the superheroes we know were just different versions of the same character, Superman and Batman, all part of the same plan. For Buddhists, the idea that Buddha could be an incarnation of a Hindu god seems to misunderstand, or worse, misrepresent, what makes their tradition unique. This debate might sound philosophical, but the stakes are enormous. If Buddhists accept that Buddha was an avatar of Vishnu, it could alter how their entire spiritual framework is understood. For Hindus, questioning this claim could mean revisiting centuries of tradition and reinterpreting their sacred texts. In both cases, it shakes the foundations of belief, and for those deeply invested in their faith, that's no small thing. It's easy to see how this debate has turned into more than just a historical or theological quibble. This is about the very identity of two massive world religions. On one side, we've got Hindu traditions boldly placing Buddha as the ninth avatar of Vishnu, a belief that shakes the very core of what Buddhism stands for. And this isn't just a niche perspective either. It's supported by texts like the Bhagavata Purana, which flat out states that Buddha's appearance was part of Vishnu's divine plan. In fact, the text describes Buddha as having descended to lead astray those who were not worthy of Vedic rituals, which is quite the bombshell when you think about it. What this suggests is that Buddha's role in Hinduism is seen not as a rebel who departed from its teachings, but as someone fulfilling a higher purpose within the cosmic order of Dharma. Some Hindu scholars take this even further, arguing that Buddha's core teachings, like compassion and reforming harmful practices, align with Vishnu's mission to preserve and protect the universe. In their view, Buddha wasn't trying to break away from Hinduism, but rather to cleanse it from within, getting rid of the corruption that had built up over time. They point to overlapping concepts like karma and rebirth, and even draw comparisons between the Noble Eightfold Path and Hindu ethical teachings. But here's the thing. This isn't just a harmonious blending of ideas meant to bridge the two religions. For many Buddhists, this feels more like a theological power play, a way to pull Buddhism back into the fold of Hinduism, erasing the distinct identity that Buddhists have built for centuries. And they're not about to let that happen without a fight. Buddhists have been quick to push back, and their arguments strike at the heart of the issue. The first and most obvious counterpoint? Buddha himself. Buddhists often refer to the Buddha's own teachings, found in texts like the Digha Nikaya, where he consistently rejected the idea of a supreme creator god. Buddha's philosophy revolves around the natural laws of the universe, karma, cause and effect, not divine intervention. For Buddhists, this entire framework is fundamentally at odds with the concept of Buddha as an avatar of Vishnu, which relies on divine will and cosmic order. And then there's the historical argument. Buddha was a real person, a prince named Siddhartha Gautama, who walked away from a life of luxury to seek answers to life's most pressing questions. His enlightenment was the result of years of self-discipline, meditation, and human effort, not some predestined divine role. The fact that he achieved nirvana through his own perseverance is central to the Buddhist belief in human potential. Claiming Buddha as an avatar strips away this human element, which is precisely what makes his story so relatable and inspiring to millions of people. In this light, Buddhists argue that the idea of Buddha as a divine avatar is not only philosophically incompatible, but also historically inaccurate. They see this claim as a later addition by Hinduism, an attempt to reintegrate Buddhism into its fold after it had emerged as a distinct tradition. To Buddhists, this isn't a case of interfaith harmony. It's more like spiritual colonization, an effort to absorb their religion back into Hinduism. But the Buddhist resistance doesn't stop at philosophical debates. They're pointing to the clear historical divide between the two traditions and emphasizing the uniqueness of Buddha's teachings. For them, this isn't just about defending their founder's legacy. It's about preserving the independence of their faith from a claim that threatens to overshadow what makes Buddhism stand apart from Hinduism. And the stakes couldn't be higher. Buddhists are definitely calling out what they perceive as a pattern of Hindu appropriation, whether it's Buddhist sites or symbols. Take Bodh Gaya, for instance, the place where Buddha attained enlightenment. It's a major point of contention. In 2013, during the Global Buddhist Conference in New Delhi, tensions flared when some Hindu speakers referred to Buddha as merely a Hindu reformer. The Buddhist delegates didn't hold back. They walked out in protest, illustrating just how this debate spills over into real-world interactions. For many Buddhist leaders, the idea that Buddha could be an avatar isn't just a philosophical dispute. It's perceived as a form of spiritual aggression. They argue it's part of a larger attempt to erase Buddhism's distinct identity, especially in a land where it originated. This isn't merely about seeking harmony between faiths. For many Buddhists, it's a fight for survival. They see the avatar claim as an existential threat to their tradition. And just when you think you've grasped the surface of this controversy, there's a historical plot twist that reveals even deeper layers. Let's rewind a bit, back to around 500 BCE. Buddhism burst onto the scene in ancient India, presenting a formidable challenge to the established Hindu order. It outright rejected the caste system, questioned the authority of the Vedas, and offered a path to enlightenment that was accessible to everyone. This was no small feat. Suddenly, Hinduism was facing its first major ideological rival right at home. Fast forward a few centuries, and Buddhism had spread rapidly, threatening traditional Hindu temples and social hierarchies. The narrative of Buddha's inclusion as an avatar of Vishnu is a fascinating chapter in the long history of religious interaction between Hinduism and Buddhism. Some historians view this as a strategic move by Hindu leaders, not out of reverence for Buddha, but to subtly subsume Buddhism within Hinduism. By claiming Buddha as an avatar, the uniqueness of his teachings could be blurred, making it easier for people to accept Hinduism's dominance. However, this tactic may have inadvertently weakened Buddhism in India, as followers began seeing Buddha as just another deity under the broader Hindu pantheon. Over time, sacred Buddhist sites like Bodh Gaya became mixed with Hindu traditions, with temples dedicated to Shaivism rising in importance. The 19th century efforts to reclaim Bodh Gaya as a Buddhist site, aided by British archaeologists, highlighted how these religious sites had been transformed. The question of why Buddha was considered an avatar of Vishnu leads us deep into religious politics. The Bhagavata Purana, a key Hindu text, lists Buddha as the 9th avatar of Vishnu, underscoring Hinduism's claim. On the other hand, Buddhists argue that this contradicts their core teachings, which reject the idea of a supreme creator God. Instead, Buddha is presented as a human teacher, not a divine being. Early Buddhist texts, like the Pali Canon, make no reference to Vishnu or avatars, complicating the Hindu claim. Adding to this complexity is the timing. The idea of Buddha as an avatar emerged centuries after his death, notably during the Gupta period. Art history, too, plays a part in this debate. Early Buddhist art did not depict Buddha as divine, but later, Hindu iconography started incorporating Buddha-like figures. The Ellora caves in Maharashtra are a prime example of this blending, where Buddhist and Hindu images coexist, leading to debates over whether this was assimilation or appropriation. As evidence piles up, the discussion shifts from a matter of proof to interpretation. Both sides present their texts and artifacts, but these are often interpreted through the lens of their respective traditions. The controversy has spilled over into modern times, manifesting in legal battles over Buddhist sites and online debates. The Bodh Gaya temple bombing in 2013 is a grim reminder of the tension that still exists. Social media has become a battleground, with Buddhists and Hindus clashing over Buddha's identity. In 2015, a Twitter feud erupted after a prominent Hindu leader tweeted about Buddha's origins. This religious controversy extends beyond India's borders. Diplomatic tensions flare when countries like China assert that Buddha was born in Nepal, challenging India's claim to his heritage. Even the Dalai Lama, a proponent of interfaith dialogue, finds himself caught in the middle, with both sides seizing on his words to support their narratives. This historical clash also leads to an intriguing plot twist. What if, instead of Buddha being an avatar of Vishnu, Vishnu's concept as a compassionate God was influenced by Buddha's teachings? This theory suggests that as Buddhism grew in prominence, it may have shaped Hinduism. The rise of nonviolence, ahimsa, in Hinduism after Buddha's time is one potential indicator. The idea of a God incarnating to teach compassion mirrors the Buddhist concept of the bodhisattva. The narrative of Vishnu's avatars could have been influenced by Buddhism, just as much as Buddhism was absorbed into Hinduism. Early Vedic texts depict Vishnu as a minor deity, but by the time of the Bhagavad Gita, he had risen to the status of a supreme god. Some scholars suggest this transformation was shaped by Buddhist ideals that permeated Indian society. This theory isn't without its critics. Hindu scholars defend the ancient roots of their traditions, while Buddhists resist the idea that their teachings were absorbed into another religion. However, if true, this could rewrite the history of Hindu-Buddhist interactions. Instead of Buddhism being a branch of Hinduism, Hinduism may owe much of its philosophical evolution to Buddhist thought. Such a revelation would force both religions to reconsider their intertwined histories. The implications of this controversy stretch far beyond academic circles. In modern India, where religious identity is closely tied to politics, this debate could reshape power dynamics. For instance, educational curricula could be altered to reflect different interpretations of Buddha's identity, leading to significant shifts in how religious history is taught. Furthermore, this debate challenges the very nature of religious boundaries. If two of the world's major religions are so deeply interconnected, can any religion truly claim to exist in isolation? Ultimately, whether Buddha was an avatar of Vishnu or vice versa, the deeper question lies in how these two traditions have influenced and shaped each other. This historical relationship highlights the fluidity of religious traditions and forces us to reconsider what we know about the evolution of Eastern spirituality. This controversy invites a deeper exploration of both Hinduism and Buddhism. By looking beyond the political and theological claims, we can see a shared spiritual journey rooted in compassion, nonviolence, and the pursuit of enlightenment. Regardless of their historical entanglements, the teachings of both Buddha and Vishnu continue to inspire millions today, reminding us that spirituality is not about drawing boundaries, but about transcending them.